Good morning and welcome to our fourth COVID-19 webinar. So today we have with us Leanne Pilkington and Tim McKibben will be joining us very shortly, and our friends from New South Wales Fair Trading, Peter Dunphy, Executive Director, Complaints and Disputes, that's a bit of a mouthful, Peter, and Lachlan Malloch, Policy Manager. So welcome. And if you have questions, please put your question into the chat box and we will try to answer as many questions as we can as time permits. So over to you, Leanne.
Thanks so much, Nerida, and welcome, Lachlan and Peter. We really do appreciate you taking the time to be here. Being in charge of disputes and complaints, being in charge of disputes and complaints, Peter, that's a bit of a full-time job right now. Good grief.
Yeah, it's compliance and dispute resolution. So yeah, it is, and it is covering fair trading, safe work, and liquor and gaming. So yeah, it's keeping me occupied. There's certainly lots of issues in terms of COVID around all of those industries and all of those areas. So yes, it's a very busy time for us.
So everybody that is on the webinar, everybody is waiting for the announcement on what the rent relief is going to look like, where National Cabinet has indicated that the residential rent relief is up to each individual state. What's holding this up, and when are we going to hear something?
Yeah, well, Leanne, certainly what has to be done at the state level is to make some amendments to regulations. So they're being drafted at present. And we totally understand the pressure and the need to resolve the matter as quickly as possible. So we are expecting that there will be announcements, in the coming days. And at this stage, we're just waiting to see the final versions of the what regulatory amendments need to be made. But you can rest assured there's a lot of work going on at the moment to be ready to for any announcement, which is expected shortly.
Yeah, I did have conversations with government yesterday, and they did say that it was likely to come over the weekend. So that's also your understanding?
Yeah, well, look, that's a decision of government as to when they make the announcements, but we are expecting to be ready for it to be announced any time. Yes, yeah.
Now, there's calls from a number of tenancy groups for a rent strike. What would you say about that? Because we all know that there's there's a moratorium on evictions, but there is no moratoriums on rent, right?
That's exactly right, Leanne. Yeah, so the moratorium is on evictions, and certainly the announcements will be around supporting how that will work and any support for both tenants and landlords in terms of that approach. So our advice to tenants would be to keep paying your rent, but to commence negotiations with your landlord if you're in financial distress in terms of your situation because of COVID. And we would also advise landlords to start planning for any potential announcements that may be made around the moratorium on evictions and what they may need to do as landlords and agents. So it's really both landlords and agents in terms of what needs to be done. Our advice is for the tenants to put anything in writing to the landlord, and certainly we'll be putting some support around that. So our advice would be firstly to try and negotiate that between the tenants and the agent or the landlord, and then if that's not possible, Fair Trading will be providing further support to actually assist people in negotiating any particular outcome.
Okay, so there's a lot of noise on the webinar.
Tim needs to put himself on mute.
Tim, can you put yourself on mute straight away, please? Honestly, he's going to get such a smack when this is all over. I cannot even begin to tell you. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so just to recap, Peter, the best thing if a tenant is experiencing hardship, they need to justify it. Firstly, it's not just okay, I think I can get away with not paying any rent. They need to be able to justify that there's hardship, and they need to communicate with their agent, and their agent will have a conversation with the landlord, right?
Yeah, so preferably, yes, they should put something in writing in terms of their circumstances. And then the intention would be for to try to negotiate an arrangement between the tenant and the agent or the landlord. And then if that's not successful, Fair Trading is very happy to assist, and we will have we're beefing up our capacity to be able to assist agents and landlords and tenants in terms of negotiating if the parties can't.
That's something that, I should have known, and I didn't realise until recent weeks, was Fair Trading have got a mediation service. And so if you are unable to reach an agreement between the landlord and the tenant, Fair Trading are very happy to get involved. And so how do people access that service?
They just go through to the normal Fair Trading call centre, and we can provide you with those details as to contact that. Just to explain to Leanne, there is a mediation service, but there's also a complaint resolution service, and we're trying to do it not through formal mediation because that will slow down the process, but we will negotiate with the parties in a way that's probably a little bit less formal, but it allows issues to be dealt with a lot more quickly and not requiring to have to go through a formal mediation process. The other option then, obviously, if that's not agreed to, there will be ability for parties to go to NCAT if they're not happy with or they can't reach agreement on that. But certainly our efforts will be in trying to work with the parties to try and resolve any outstanding issues, and we will provide guidance also to landlords and to agents in terms of, and also the tenants in terms of how they can negotiate any agreement between themselves. So they don't need to come to Fair Trading. It would only be if they're having difficulty in negotiating. Yes, that's right. So I'm hoping that yes, Lachlan.
Sorry, Lachlan, what was that?
Sorry, it's also worth noting that the new regulations will actually set this out. Will actually set out what the process is required to be and what landlords and tenants will need to do before they can move to the next stage.
And so, Lachlan, those regulations, which includes
thresholds,
will the new regulations be available once the Premier comes out and makes the relief announcement, or is there going to be a bit of lag time before the detail is available?
I think there could be a little bit of a gap. The overall policy settings would be part of the announcement, but then actually seeing the regulation, because in order to make a regulation, it has to go through Executive Council, which involves the Governor of New South Wales.
And that's not until Wednesday of next week, right? Wednesday they're meeting the Governor.
That's typically when EXCO happens, yes. So
see, I've done my research.
There could be a lag between the policy and the actual fine details of exactly what that regulation says.
Yeah, understand. Now, I've had a lot of people saying to me that they've got tenants that are either overseas students and that have no longer got a job and they've got no entitlements so far. What would you say to those property managers? What can those tenants do about accessing funds to pay rent?
Yeah, so Leanne, just in terms of Fair Trading does fund a number of support services such as financial counselling. So there is a Salvation Army Money Care financial counselling service which which will be able to provide advice. They're actually quite well experienced in dealing with particularly people overseas, people who are refugees and all sorts of in situations where they may not have access to existing government support or other forms of support. So we certainly recommend that they utilise those financial counselling services, but there's also the tenancy advisory service, which again is open to anybody, and again they have people who can assist with giving people some ideas around what sorts of financial support or assistance that they might be able to access.
Okay, cool. So there's also been a lot of concern. We've got a lot of property that's been sold, obviously, and is settling at the moment. And there's been some reports of tenants refusing to actually leave, saying you can't evict me, even though the property's been sold. And as you would know, if it's been sold with vacant possession and the vendor can't provide vacant possession, that creates another round of issues. I'm hearing that government are intending on allowing those properties to continue to settle and therefore enable agents to get those people out. Is that correct?
That one I might ask Lachlan if you can maybe shed some light on that. I mean, I think it is National Cabinet have made some general decisions around it, and I think we're still trying to work through the detail of that. But yeah.
Sure, but we can say at this stage the new rules about evictions will relate to evictions on the basis of non-payment of rent or other charges, and that the sale process is not affected by that at the moment and isn't
Okay.
intended to be part of the policy.
Okay, that's good news.
So
And
that
any
should be, yeah. Sorry.
any orders that have been provided by NCAT prior to all of this, that's not impacted. They're not impacted either.
Previous NCAT orders that are already been made,
Yeah.
We believe they would stand.
Yeah. Okay.
Moratorium is going to be on new actions.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And in relation to NCAT, obviously, I realise that they're not able to do any evictions based on non-payment of rent, any new ones, but they are still able to, for example, if the property is getting damaged, if there's an issue to health and safety, those NCAT is still hearing those issues, right? Even though it's over the phone or email. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Leanne. Yeah, that they'll continue to deal with those matters as regardless. Yeah.
There's obviously a massive amount of stuff happening behind the scenes, because it's not just about, you know, a decision gets made and you can't just go, okay, this is what's happening, right? You've got a massive amount of legislation and regulation and all that stuff. So talk us through the process so everyone can sort of understand why these things take so long.
Yeah, so I guess it is a complicated process with COVID in that there is a national cabinet, pardon me, a national cabinet that is making decisions nationally, and there's a very strong focus, I think, to try to make sure that there is consistency across Australia and across jurisdictions. So that is driving that national consistency. Often they will make some of the decision, and then obviously because states have a role in implementing that decision, they'll need to add further detail, as is the case with tenancy. So for those areas, then that needs to be assessed and determine whether there needs to be any legislative changes. So for example, for the tenancy issue, it has required amendments to regulations. That decision was only made last week. So there's a very, while it seems like it takes a long time, you've got to go through parliamentary council, you've got to get drafting instructions, they've got to actually come up with a regulation. It's got to be tested, and all of the areas of government that will have an input to it need to make sure that it's actually meeting the policy determination. From a fair trading point of view, we've got to get our operational areas to have a look to make sure it makes sense, that it's enforceable and that it can be actually applied. We've got to develop frequently asked questions and guidance around that, so that when it's announced or when it's commenced, that there's all of those information and advice and assistance in place. And then also, if it has an impact like this one does, in terms of it will create a much greater demand for us in terms of staff who will now need to be redeployed to assist with any negotiations between tenants and agents and landlords. So we've got to start planning for that and make sure we've got those resources, so that when government announces that we are actually able to cope with the demands.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of logistics that go behind it. So it's not just the policy announcement, it's all of the things that government need to do. There's no point announcing something and not be able to do it for weeks or months.
Yeah,
so
totally.
we've got to make sure we're ready to go as soon as the announcement. And because of the nature of COVID, and it's just such an exceptional circumstance that there are decisions being made daily and hourly, and we've got to be able to respond to those. And we are trying to respond as quickly as possible. I recognise things like the tenancy issue are causing agents a lot of grief, and they want answers straight away. But we've got to make sure that the answers that we give are sensible and that they are practical, they can be implemented, and we've got the support there in place to actually provide them. And again, I think the example with the tenancy is, it's not only the government will be, as part of that process, it is about providing assistance packages to industry. and so to the both the tenants and the landlords. So again, Treasury have to get involved. They've got to work out the numbers. They've got to work out how they're going to fund this and how they're going to pay for it. So there's a lot of parties that have a role in terms of it. And then we also, at the state level, we've also got the what's called the State Emergency Operations Centre, which is a group that's set up at Homebush. So you would have seen during the bushfire emergencies when the Rural Fire Service Commission is reporting it daily in the Premier, which the Premier still is. There is a crisis centre which is at Homebush. At the moment, that's populated by over 20 agencies who all have a role in the COVID response. Our department have representation there. Actually, our secretary of the department works from that emergency response centre each day. The intention is then that at the state level, we've got to make sure that we're consistent in terms of the messaging. So anything that we develop through an FAQ or through guidance has to go through that centre as well to make sure that we're not saying something that's contrary to Department of Health or to housing or to one of the other areas. So there's a lot of work, which is keeping us awake at night and keeping us
way too much detail for me and all of that. Good grief.
So to make sure that all that is happening. Yep.
Yeah, well, everything's
right.
done, you know, I completely get it. I just want to take you back to one comment. You mentioned that National Cabinet is, even though the states are actually responsible for doing the rental relief in each state, they are looking for consistency. So if I hear that correctly, the states, all of the states should end up with a similar kind of response. Is that right?
That's the aim. So most of the decisions will go through to the National Cabinet, and that's the intention of trying to get all of the jurisdictions to agree to a particular approach.
Right.
So then it goes back to the states. The reality is we've all got different legislative regimes, so we have to work out a way to implement it within our existing frameworks, which are all different. But the intention is that the general principles are applied the same across all jurisdictions.
Okay, let me just check in with Nerida. Nerida, have we got any questions? Apparently not. I haven't seen any come up, which absolutely stuns me. But anyway, if she has got any, I'll give her permission to just jump on in and ask. Now, of course, there is obviously the rent relief is everybody's overwhelming priority. But once that's done, what's next for you guys in relation to all of this COVID? Is there anything else that's still outstanding for you?
Yeah, well, look, for COVID, it's every day is a new issue. So whether it's issues in the construction, so our key focus at the moment is making sure that industries can continue to operate, such as the construction industry, the property industry, the agricultural sector, where possible, that those continue. So there is a lot of work, not just in the property sector, but also in construction. We've had lots of issues about COVID on construction sites and what we need to do to make sure that the industry can continue to operate. And again, it's about trying to ensure that there are strong controls in place that will ensure that the industry will be able to operate, and practical issues are dealt with every day in terms of what that means for construction workers. Same with agriculture, we need to have that security of food supply. Right. So there's a whole range of issues in terms of yeah, that's right. And I think the other thing is we talked about potentially people who are on visas, or work visas. I mean, there are other options for people in terms of doing work in the agricultural sector, because there is a lot of work to be done to us, in terms of picking and fruit picking and all of those things. So it's about just making sure that we've got all of those, from our perspective, all of the safety issues and all of the governance issues around our legislation to assist those industries to continue to operate. Yep.
Yeah, cool. And of course, March 23rd, Monday, March 23rd, was a big day for real estate anyway, with the Residential Tenancies Act and also our educational training reforms coming in. At the same time, this is when COVID hit, right? We realised what a serious issue it was. How are you going with the other changes with Tenancies Act and with the education and training reforms? Are you getting much Any questions from agents about what they need to do, or is everyone just worried about COVID and nothing else at the moment?
No, we still are getting certainly inquiries and requests for information in terms of the residential tenancy reforms. Certainly, I mean, I think the key sorts of areas at the moment are more the practical inquiries about what the licensing transitions mean for individuals, what they need to do in terms of renewals, and what's the eligibility criteria for for the class ones, licenses in charge for the agents and for the certificates of registration. So I think we're still getting lots of individual, this is my circumstance, what does that mean for me?
Okay.
How do I navigate the system? And certainly that's been something that we've been getting quite a bit of. I guess the other thing for us is we have been, we put out a statement of regulatory intent to say that we would be taking an advisory approach for the first 6 months. So it is also about,
Yes.
working with individuals to help them navigate the
So
process at this stage. So certainly. Yeah.
So that advisory approach doesn't mean that the regulations didn't come into force on the 23rd of March,
No.
right? It just means that you're having an education process for the next 6 months to help people through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. So in terms of our compliance and enforcement approach, we take a graduated response from advice through to, it can escalate in terms of enforcement actions. What we're saying for the first 6 months, our approach will be at the bottom of the compliance pyramid, which is about providing information and assistance. If people don't get it quite right, we're not going to, we'll take a more proportional, lenient approach in terms of helping people in terms of educating what they need to do to comply. So the first 6 months is really about making sure people understand their obligations and that they're able to, and assisting them with implementing those obligations. So there is that period in the first 6 months. You've got to comply with the legislation, but certainly our focus is on getting people up to speed in terms of what they need to do and working with them on that.
There's one question that we've been getting about trust accounting. So obviously we've got to have 2 trust accounts, one for sales and one for property management, but we're very limited in the way that we can take money out of a trust account. And so how do we do that?
Yeah, so I know Tim has raised that with us and put forward some solutions, and I think one of the solutions Tim put forward is quite a good one, which I was talking to Matt Whitten this morning about that, and that will be, I think, the advice that we'll be giving. So I think at this stage, if you've only got one trust account and you need to move to 2 trust accounts, one for sales and one for rent, what we'd be advising is that they maintain that for the existing trust account they've got for to use as their rental account, but keep the past sales in that account for the time being and finalise those sales through that trust account. Establish a second trust account, which would be for future sales, and then that avoids the need to tell renters that they've got to transfer their account, and then just finalise all the previous sales from the first trust account in that existing account. We'll provide instructions to the auditors that we would deem that to not be in breach and that would be in compliance. And that seems like a really sensible, practical way to transition to the 2 accounts.
Yeah, that does. That makes a whole lot of sense. So thank you for that. Nerida, any questions for us? I know Peter's got another obligation in a few minutes. So there you are. Okay.
Yes, I am here. Sorry, slight technical issue earlier on. We have had a question. We've had reports of the Sheriff's Office not acting on warrants that have been already issued by NCAT. Can you advise why this is so?
That's a very good question, and I'm not too sure. We need to know the more specifics of that matter. If someone's got a bit of details, we can sort of follow up and find out why that's the case. But it may be during the COVID period that people some of the, certainly every government regulatory agency is doing only essential business, and I don't know whether they've deemed that not to be something that they'll be doing, necessarily in the short term. So I don't really know the specific details of that, but if you could, Nera, send that through. If your member wants to send through some more specific details, we could look into it and advise on what the case is. But we're not aware of any particular announcement around sheriffs not following up on NCAT orders. And we'd be interested to know if there was a problem. And we're happy to to see what we can do to follow up on that. Yeah.
We will definitely send you some more info on that. Any other questions, Nerida?
So there was a question about the information that you've given is mostly about residential tenancies. How does the commercial sector fit into all of this?
Yeah, so the commercial sector, there is what was agreed at the National Cabinet was a code with principles, the mandatory code and principles so there is already some agreement at the national level and at the state level in terms of what needs to be done around commercial leases. That's managed in New South Wales by the Office of the Small Business Commissioner, so that's outside of our area, but certainly there are requirements and there has been agreement. I think the Commonwealth has a much greater role in terms of commercial leases. So
yeah, I am hoping
they have been able to make some decisions. Yeah.
I am hoping to talk to Tim after 11 o'clock on commercial rents. I don't know whether that's going to be possible or not, but hopefully. Any other questions for Peter and Lachlan, Nerida? Before
No, I have a positive comment to them from one of our members saying that their experience with fair trading officers assisting in mediation has been good for their team.
Oh, that's nice.
So I thought it was nice to have a positive. Most of the questions that have been asked, you've answered as you've been going along. So
okay.
I think that we could probably say the only other question is about legally sending termination notices if tenants are 14 days in arrears and haven't been affected by COVID. Can they still do that?
So the certainly as I think we've already said, there's certainly no moratorium on not paying on paying rent. So yeah, people could certainly continue to follow that course of action if it's non-COVID related. So they just need to establish that there was no financial hardship in terms of their the situation in regard to COVID.
But even so, Peter, even if it is related to COVID, the agents need to follow that process anyway because of not to breach the terms of their landlord insurance. So we know that we're
that's
not
right.
going
They should still be paying.
Yeah,
that's right. They should still be paying their rent. As we said, I think the termination of a lease is where the moratorium is. The paying of rent, there's no moratorium on that, so people should be paying their rent. Yeah.
Okay, people should be paying their rent. You heard it here.
Yeah.
All righty. If there's no more questions, I'm mindful of the time, Peter. So thank you, Lachlan and Peter. We really, really appreciate it. No doubt we will be speaking to you again very, very soon.
No, look, very happy to revisit another time and to give an update.
That'd be amazing.
All this is up to, and I guess over the next couple of weeks, we'll have a better idea. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Leanne.
For sure. All right. Thank you so much. Now, Nerida, have we got Tim on the line so we can talk about commercial leasing or not?
Unfortunately, no, he hasn't been able to dial in. So we'll
reschedule a commercial conversation. Yeah, we'll reschedule a commercial conversation just as soon as we can. We'll be back to you all very soon. Thank you very much for listening and watching. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
All the best.
Thanks, Lachlan.